Good morning. Okay, so we're going to do the second part of 2.4, and this is complex numbers and operations. So last class we talked about simplifying and adding, multiplying, doing all those things with square roots. We're going to introduce kind of a new, pretty important topic here that is complex numbers. So this is big here. Okay, the imaginary unit I is the principal square root of -1. So then we're saying I squared is equal to -1. Basically, all of this math, an imaginary number is any number bi where b is a non-zero number. Basically, what we are doing here is anytime that we had in algebra 1 a square root of like a -25, if I were to go and put that into the calculator, it would tell me error. Well, now what I am telling you is this fact right here. The square root of -1 is equal to I. So anytime that I have a square root of a negative number, I am always going to write it as the product of -1 times that positive number. And the, we will replace the square root of -1 with an I. So it's going to allow us to be able to solve certain problems and do certain things. And again, this is the one fact that we need to know. This is really important. Well, if I squared is equal to the square root of -1 times the square root of -1, anytime that we have two numbers that are underneath the square root, this is going to just get rid of the square root and it's going to equal a -1. So an imaginary number times an imaginary number actually equals a negative value. Okay. So first few problems are going to look something like this. Simplify the square root. Okay, we did this the other day. Nothing different, except now it's negative. If I go to pick up a calculator, it would tell me no solution doesn't work. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite this as the square root of -1 times the square root of 25. Now you see I have this -1. That's going to give me an I, and I can now simplify the square root of 25. So that would be 5I is what this will simplify to. Again, you're not going to have a calculator where you can do that. You're going to have to break this up on its own. So anytime you have a negative, you automatically write square root -1, square root of 7. This will always simplify to an I. So I have I square root of 7. This problem right here, square root of -18. I'm going to write it as the square root of -1 times the square root of 18. And now I'm going to simplify this like I did the other class. I'm looking for two perfect square factors where one is a perfect square factor of 18. So it'd be the square root of -1, square root of 9, square root of 2, because 9 times 2 is 18. And again, if I multiply all three of these together, it still gives me my original problem. But I'm going to write this as 3I square root of 2. Okay. Again, if you put the I first, it wouldn't be wrong, but this is how it always looks in a textbook. This problem here, again, I always break up the -1 and the 200. Now I can simplify this. I'm looking for a perfect square factor in 200. That would be -1, square root of 100, square root of 2. These two right here would simplify to a 10, I square root of 2. Okay. So really we're doing the same thing that we did last class on Wednesday. It's just the first step is you have to take out an I. Okay, or that -1, which is going to in turn be an I. So why are we doing this? Well, because we have quadratics where we have to solve these now. Okay, so if I had x squared equals 3 and I took the square root of both sides, trying to solve for x, take the square root of both sides. Over here, all that happens is I get x equals plus or minus. On this side, I have the square root of -3. I am not going to leave my answer like this. I'm going to simplify this radical. So I have x equals plus or minus square root of -1, square root of 3. I would have x equals plus or minus I square root 3. That would be my solution. Same thing here, square root both sides. X equals plus or minus square root of -7. I'm going to simplify the square root of -7. So it'll be plus or minus square root of -1, square root of 7. X would equal plus or minus I square root 7. Again, all this I is telling me, hey, you've got a negative underneath a radical. Square root both sides. X equals plus or minus square root of -20. So now I'm going to simplify this. I'm going to rewrite it as plus or minus square root of -1, square root of 20. Now I'm just looking at the 20. What perfect square factor can I get from 20? Well, that would be square root of 4, square root of 5. So I would have x is equal to square root of 4 is plus or minus 2. Square root of negative 1 is I. Can't do anything with the square root of 5, so I leave it alone. Okay. Next problem. Again, we did these the other day. We're going to divide by 7. It gives me x squared equals negative 7. I'm going to square root both sides. X is equal to plus or minus negative 7 underneath the square root, which would be plus or minus I square root 7. Okay, again, this is broken up to square root of negative 1, square root of 7, which is where the I comes from. Here, get the x squared by itself. So I'm going to add 5, 3x squared equals negative 27. Divide by 3, x squared equals negative 9. Square root both sides. X equals plus or minus 3i. Okay, and again, I got 3i from rewriting this as the square root of negative 1, square root of 9. Subtract the 5. Negative 1/2 x squared equals 24. I'm going to multiply by negative 2. Gives me x squared equals negative 48. Now I'm going to square root both sides. X is equal to plus or minus square root of negative 48. I'm going to simplify this. We break it down. Plus or minus square root of negative 1, square root of 48. I can rewrite 48 as, 16 times 3? Right, so this is 16, square root of 16, square root of 3. So I've got x equals plus or minus 4i square root 3. So there's going to be some problems like this. And this is the main reason that we deal with complex numbers. So this is going to be the first video. Try to solve those problems again. Anytime you have a negative underneath the square root, that we're going to change that to a I. So anytime we're going to do that, rewrite it and make sure that your answer has an I in it.